Welcome back to Nick Lenz Comic Corner, Classic Non Classics. This is episode number 2758 and episode 2652. These two trades have one thing in common: the same writer, Matt Wagner. First up is a series I really want to talk about for a long time, this Comic Corner series. That being a series I read a few years ago, and I love this series. It was so good. I was reading at the time the book came out, but my gosh, basically reading I'm like, why the heck did I not read this when this came out? This book was so freaking good. Each story arc for this series, except for the last one, was 4 chapters apiece. So the first that we have is Sandman Mystery Theater, Book 1, which contains the first 12 issues of the ongoing series, which means, yes, we have the first 3 story arcs here. And those 3 stories are, the writing here is done by Matt Wagner, obviously. Artwork by Guy Davis, John Wickens, and R.G. Taylor. The arcs are The Tarantula, which takes the first 4 issues. The Face, 5 through 8. And The Brute, 9 through 12. Your main character series are Wesley Dodds the Sandman, his girlfriend Diana Beaumont. Her father is here, which sadly put, this is the one comic book series, this was his last appearance in comics. We also have Wesley Dodds' butler. Oh, here's a little fun fact about this book. He does encounter 2 characters from the JSA stuff, like in this series. Now in this trade here, he does arc teams up with the Ted Knight Starman, and he fights the Mist. Also, there's an arc in this series involving a lesbian vampire. Yep. So, in the case of this opening, by the way, before I continue here, the Sandman, Wesley Sandman, is known for, he wears a gas mask, wears a suit, and carries a gas gun. He doesn't kill anybody. Nope, he is not a killer. He just gasses them with knockout gas. So the first arc is known as The Tarantula. By the way, love this cover artwork. It's so freaking good. Yes, published on Vertigo imprint. This was released in April of 93, and I think this last issue was released in, March of 94. So, the first story arc here is basically called The Tarantula, where we deal with Dana basically in a nightclub with her friends. Yeah, and apparently, basically, Dana's mother does not want her to go to Harlem for reasons. Do you think because of racism? Maybe. But he doesn't say the N-word. It's like, where's her bag? And there's a joke in here about like he's an 18th century advocate, Morales. Basically, like, the way she's saying it, it's like basically that it's like from her perspective, it's like from his mind, he's like basically like the old 19th century, 19 Amendments. And then of course we have him going to a study and then him being confronted by the Sandman, who is in his safe for reasons. He gets knocked out, not killed. Yeah, and of course our friends go to a nightclub. Yeah. So then she goes to a party. It looks like, I think it's supposed to be at her house, where she's here and she basically meets the man he's supposed to spend her life with, Wesley Dodds, who apparently his father is actually Edward Dodds. Here's Wesley without his mask on. Yeah, he's a pudgy guy. So they're introduced and they kind of hit it off. The fact that, yeah. Now here's the thing about him and Dana. They never officially married in the comics. They were life partners. They were together for a long time, but never married, and to my knowledge, never had any children. But she did have a nephew, Sandy, who became in the 2000s a new Sandman after Wesley Dodds died, who also had sand powers, believe it or not. Yeah, in this book, for some reason, they mentioned that he's actually just a character in the comic strip for some reason. Yeah, which is kind of weird. Like, why would it do it to her nephew? That makes no freaking sense at all. Yes. Now, as for why in the world Wesley and Diana never had any kids, no idea. it was kind of weird. They established this very early on in the comics that these two were a couple, and then basically they're just referred to as life partners. Also, this whole thing with the tarantula. This is a guy who beats up women and kills them. And at one point, basically, she meets up with the Sandman. Of course, she's investigating the tarantula. And she wants to basically go be with her friends because that's where she wanted to be, with her friends. Because that's what she wanted to do. But I was like, nope, gotta stay there. And then Wesley shows up. By the way, in this very arc, by the way. Yeah. Yeah. But it's a very interesting story, and of course, it's mostly put just... By the way, this is set during the Depression. Yes. And of course, they find out who this... Oh, this is a really cool thing here, where he of course, Wesley walks and wears his coat, wears when he's a Sandman. And just by sheer coincidence, the coat is covering up the fact that the butler's got his hands on the gas gun. Yes. Yeah, does Tarantula confront him? Oh, yes, he does confront Tarantula. And there's this weird, like, stuff here related to some various women here. It's a big serial murder, and it was really gross seeing with Chubby Guy. Of course, yeah, Wesley basically walking him, knocking him out, and eventually he's tortured. So, if you're curious, who the heck is the tarantula? At one point, she's being whipped with a frickin' chain. Yes. And then also, at one point, her father goes miss. She's wanting information from her father. But, of course, because the 30s, men in this book, with the exception of Wesley, he's not written like this. All the men in this book would be sexist toward her. All because she's a woman. And because also she dared hang out in a nightclub in Harlem. Yes. Eventually, of course, they do find the murderer, and then, of course, well, the story ends basically like, well, where Diane's going to see Wesley again. Then comes The Face, where this is all about Chinatown stuff, and the artwork is weird. Oh my gosh. It's like, this artwork here for the second arc here is done by... Now, Guy Davis, I like the artwork he did for that book. Everyone looks very sharp, good looking. But this arc, wow, this is done by John Wickens. It's like, okay, it's like some faces are fine, but some faces are just plain weird. It's like the art style looks, it's like so drastically different. It's like, yeah, it's like the whole thing with the face thing. It's involving serial murders in Chinatown. Also, Wesley, wow, it's like the artist did not know what the heck the guy looked like. Diana actually looks like how she was picking our comics, where Wesley looks like he's much older than his previous appearance. Here, like, I think in the last book, he looked like he was probably like in his 20s. Here, he looks like he's freaking 40s. Yeah. Yeah. And it's all about, basically the big thing of the story here is all about Chinatown murders. Like, okay, go to Chinatown in the second story of this very series. And of course, Wesley investigates it too. I do like how his suit is drawn here. It's fine. I had no problem with the suit. Just some of the faces here are a bit slanted. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not going to reveal who the heck the serial killers are, but they do in fact reveal by the end of the story. And of course, basically, Wesley hooks up with Diana. And the second story arc, apparently, like, excuse me, where the new artist for this arc, which is A.G. Tyler, who apparently has kept the same style as John Watkins, who kept the same look for Wesley from the previous arc, but changed the color of his suit. So, the Brute is this serial killer who basically is more brutal. And it's basically like blah blah boxing in here. So it's like the first arc is about basically a cultist. Second involves Chinatown. This one involves basically just a plain old serial killer. You're like, okay, and all about it's somewhat gross in some places, but still really interesting story arc. Matt Wagner himself does a great job with this book. I'll give this book a 10 out of 10, but I will recommend this for adults because a lot of the stuff in this book is adult content. Do not have kids read this. Because it's Vertigo. Vertigo is meant to be for adult comics. And speaking of Matt Wagner, we have Batman Grendel. This contains the 2 miniseries that these two had, which are only 2 issues apiece for some reason. Yeah, remember Matt Wagner. Basically, it's like 4 stories. You have Devil's Riddle, Devil's Mystique, Devil's Bones, Devil's Dance. That is pretty much your 4 chapters in here. He does an artwork and you read this book like, okay, why the heck couldn't he do the artwork for Sandman? Who knows? It does leave you curious. Who the heck is Grendel? Grendel is basically a vigilante who actually kills people. Yeah, and Matt Wagner drew this guy since the 80s. As a matter of fact, there was a miniseries featuring him just like a couple years ago. And while that was published in the 90s, this was published in... Let me take a look here about this one here. So, the first miniseries is basically Devil's Riddle. It's a one-shot. Yeah, and because of the fact that he created this character, of course, basically, you would have him cross over with him. Yeah. First, we have just two miniseries Batman Grendel versus Devil's Bones, which is 2 issues released in 1996. Devil's Riddle was released in August of 1993, and Devil's Masquerade was released in August of 1993. Yeah. So it's like 2 one-shots and 1 mini-series. Yeah, and this book features Grendel Prime. Mostly put, I think, in this miniseries. This has appearances by the Tim Drake Robin. And... yeah, and the thing with Grendel is, the one that appears in this book is Hunter Rose. I believe he's the original, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Hunter Rose was the original one. There's also other Grendels, per se. Yeah, this first one came after... basically the War Child miniseries, which featured Grendel Prime. Basically, the whole thing of this one is just basically just uh, Batman fighting Grendel because he's bored. And the second one basically just a two one shots with sequel to this one. It's about stealing a museum related to murders and all related to Grendel Prime. Just basically, I would just recommend just reading this book. Book is actually pretty good. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Would I review more Grendel in the future? Yes. Matter of fact, I ordered the Grendel Omnibus. Now, I have not read much of Grendel per se. The only thing I have read for him, aside from these two books here, was Devil's Crucible. I think was like the most recent book that came out with for Grendel. Yes, that was the most recent thing they released for him. Yeah, Devil's Crucible. I think it was like an 8-issue limited series. And keep this character was publishing since 1982. Yes. Would I recommend this book to Matt Manor fans? Yes. If you never read Grendel, check this book out. It's like Batman is like he does do crossovers like this, and my guess is probably now. I'm not sure whose idea it was in this miniseries. Like either this was Matt Wagner's idea to get back. He was working with DC at the time, or two, DC must thought, oh, Grendel's doing pretty well over there. We like to use crossovers. Can we cross over with your character Matt Wagner? They're like, sure. But I'm going to write and draw it. Because I've done some more stuff for Batman. Yes. And if you're really curious, for Matt Wagner is Batman stuff. Is this the first Bat book he worked on? Well, I would say the first miniseries is. Actually, no. The first book he worked on for DC, for when it features Batman, is the Legend Dark Knight storyline. Yep. And there was a 3-issue arc from that one. Then he did, of course, these two minis. He did basically the first miniseries, which came out in 1993. Then Adventures Annual. Then he did, in 1996, he did the second miniseries, and issued Batman Black and White. Actually, before that, he did, at the second after this, basically what he's published on here is that the first Batman book he worked on was Legend Dark Knight, then Riddle the Factory, then actually was Legend Dark Knight, then the first Grendel miniseries, then Batman Riddler, the Riddle Factory, and then the second Grendel miniseries, Black and White, actually Batman Avengers, then the two sequels, then the two miniseries, Batman Mad Monk, Batman and Monster Man, which really good books. Last thing he worked on was issue 54 of the most recent volume, Batman. That was last thing he worked on. Last thing before that was he worked on the Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Trinity miniseries. He was the writer artist of that book. Yep. And no, nothing to do with the main miniseries. He also worked on an issue of Demon. He did a really good miniseries for Dr. Midnight. Yes, Dr. Midnight. And Vertigo, aside from Sandman, Mystery Theater, and Midnight Theater, he also worked on the Batman Xander book, which I do have one of the trades on for that one, and the House of Mystery annuals, and Winter's Edge. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, from Dynamite, he has done. List on here is the Django Zorro, Green Hornet Year 1, Grendel vs. the Shadow, Shadow 100, 8-page journal, Shadow, Death of Margot Lane, Shadow Year 1, The Spirit, the 13-issue series in the book, the 20-issue run for Zorro, and Zorro Rides Again. That's what he's done for that one. And some might be asking, has Matt Wagner ever done a book for Marvel? He has. He did Sabotage #1, the 90s one, not the 6-issue book. The first issue of Ultimate Marvel Champ, and 1 page of Wolverine Volume 2, number 9, which came from any of his DC work. Because it seems like when it comes to Matt Wagner, it seems like the only thing major he's worked on is just Grendel and Mage. Yeah. It's like that's what got his start, was doing those 2 books, and eventually he has some Batman stuff, which is really good, and of course this stuff for Vertigo. The Vertigo stuff, by the way, when he's taking the skull from the museum, Robin fires an arrow at the skull, And it turns out it's actually Grendel himself from the future. Yes, and he goes up another dimension for some reason. That's kind of what happened at the end of the second miniseries, but I do recommend checking this book out, definitely, if you're into Grendel or Batman or Matt Wagner. But yeah, that's pretty much a particular review. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications, and do not hit the dislike button. Next up, The Misfit of Demon King Academy. Okay, next video. Bye.